Quiet for sound. Father, let her roll. Good morning. That good morning's always for our friends all around the country that hear this, so that they know that we're really with them. God has been talking to me an awful lot this morning. In our work, the Bible plays a very important part. And it is for this reason that we should have Bibles handy, and if possible, one with a concordance in it, or else a separate concordance to have by its side. Because God speaks to us very often in biblical language, and it's wonderful to be able to look up the passages that are coming through and see them in their relationship to each other and to our daily living. The study of the Bible from the standpoint of what happens has interested many, many people, and for this reason there are many, many books on the Bible. But to me, the study of the Bible is not too interesting from the standpoint of what happens, but rather of what made it happen. An event in and of itself isn't any more important than the moment in which it happens. You see a couple of children fighting on the street, and then the next minute it's all over, and there's nothing to the incident. But it's a very interesting thing if you could go behind that fight and see what brought the fight on, and watch the different phases of self that entered into that situation. And so it is that the front pages of newspapers are full of scandals, and people get excited reading the murders and divorces and so forth, but miss the main point of what happened that made those events occur. There is the interesting side of life, when once you can see behind an appearance. Now, it's the same thing with healings. Too many people are unhappy because some healings do not take place, and they rejoice greatly because some healings do, and neither the non-healing or the healing is too important. Rather is why isn't this healing? What's going on behind the scenes that's preventing the harmony of God being made evident? Or what is it in this case that brought the healing? There is the important thing. When we know what lies behind the events of the human scene, we will then be able to do something about it. But nobody, as far as history is concerned, has ever been able to prevent war. Now, there's no need for war. There's no excuse for war. There's no reason for war. War is as vicious, as non-productive of good as about anything you can think of in life, because there has never been a victor in war. No one has ever done anything more than win battles. Nobody has ever won a war. The winner comes out of it just as poor, just as morally demoralized, just as financially weakened as the loser. Every war has shown forth that no good came out of it, no immediate good and no ultimate good. And while this next statement, of course, is not at the moment a provable one, nevertheless, there isn't a war that had it not taken place, whatever of good came out of it wouldn't have come in some other way. In other words, go back to our Revolutionary War, I am sure that with the evolution of human consciousness, freedom would have come from the British Empire. And you might take this as a proof of it, I would, the fact that Canada, Australia, New Zealand are really no longer dominions of or empire holdings of England. They are really separate commonwealths, independent ones, with as much freedom probably as we have. They're taxed a little by England yet, but we're taxed a whole lot more for England than they are. Our contributions to England have been far greater than any or all the dominions combined. So actually, freedom is not accomplished through war. The Negro in the Civil War was not given his freedom. You can read that proclamation over all you like, but study the life of the Negro from then till now, and you will find that that proclamation did not make him free. It just gave him the privilege of earning a few dollars, but it did not give him his freedom. His freedom is now being achieved, now in this age, when politically he's been given some degree of economic freedom, some degree of political freedom. Now he's achieving his freedom, but not through any war, through the natural evolution of consciousness. We are at that stage of human consciousness now when even humans find it difficult to hold other people in slavery to themselves or to dominate others. You can see that in the breaking up of all the European empires, that the day has really come when human consciousness is ready to release its hold over other men, just as our system of capitalism for the last 40 years has been evolving to where provision is made for the hospitalization of men and the care of men and the retirement of workers and so forth and so on. Not through war, but through the evolution of consciousness. And so here we have an instrument like war, utterly destructive, of no good, yet it continues in operation because no man has an answer to its solution. And the reason is, the solution has always been sought in externals. If you were to study the makeup of the original League of Nations, not from the standpoint of someone who was personally interested in controlling others, but you would soon see that it never had a chance to succeed from the beginning, because it was all based on majorities, it was all based on control, it was all based on the dominion of this group over that group, and sooner or later human consciousness will break through. And the same with this United Nations. It never had a chance to succeed because in the mind of those who originally conceived it, there was no thought of wanting to make it succeed. The original idea was to have an instrument for control, not for freedom, but for controlling those who might be seeking freedom. In other words, maintaining something of a status quo by the force of majorities. Well, of course, what happened? Russia wouldn't go in until she had the right of veto, and that doomed the entire thing to the beginning, because as soon as anyone doesn't like what happens, they veto it. And so there's no possibility of coming together. The only possibility of coming together in a human way would be if we met here and said we had to stay here until a harmonious solution was reached. Then perhaps there might be some human way, but even that wouldn't be. We'd end up fighting among ourselves. The solution doesn't lie in manipulating outward effects or governing or controlling outward effects. The solution in national and international affairs is the same as it is in individual affairs, by the change of consciousness of an individual. In other words, if there is a group that wants to run this center, and they can attain some kind of a majority, then their human will dominates in according to their desires, even though they might go into meditation and say, God lead us, or direct us. They mean God direct us in the way we want to go. Now, there would be no way to overcome that by forming another group to take it away from them, because that only leads to the next group to take it away from them. In other words, if you go back in the history of wars, prize fights, wrestling matches, baseball games, football games, you will find that as soon as someone loses, they now have a cause to live for, to win. As soon as a champion loses his championship, he's a new man, because now he wants to make a comeback. And so it is with the young one coming up. They must get to be champion. In other words, as long as we are manipulating on the outer plane, it will just be a change of circumstances, with this one up today and this one down tomorrow. And that is not ultimate peace. Ultimate peace comes through a change of consciousness. When in the South the Negro was freed, the Southerner had no change of consciousness. He still believed in slavery. He still believed in his mode of life. And for that reason, that except for paying a little wage, when the war was over, the Negro was just as enslaved, had no better education than before, no better opportunity for culture than before, no better opportunity for expansion of consciousness than before. He was still a slave. Now, as the world consciousness becomes more illumined, many stand in a horror at the idea of possession or of withholding privileges from others. And that state of consciousness begins to dominate, and the first thing you know, I'm sure that if you were to speak to the entire population of the South today, you would not find anyone there in favor of slavery. And even those who are opposed to these new laws of doing away with segregation are not really opposed on the grounds of their old prejudices, but merely on the grounds that the Negro has not achieved their own state of consciousness. Therefore, they don't have the feeling of equality. But of course, no one can have a feeling of equality, nor can anyone have a social consciousness unless they're given the opportunity for education, for culture, for refinement. And so it is that we, right here, will not stop taking advantage of each other as long as we have a consciousness that wants a benefit at the expense of the other. There must first come a transformation of consciousness within, then comes the change of activity without. Now, as you study the Bible from the standpoint of not so much the events that happened as to what made them happen, then you find a very interesting study. And you find something more important. You learn about God. You learn about the nature of God and how God acts in what we call human affairs. One of the things you learn in the Old Testament is this. You read over and over again that while the Hebrews were in obedience to God, they prospered. They won their victories. They won their battles. And they lived in prosperity. And then we read that the Hebrews were disobedient. And then all of a sudden they're losing battles and they're losing freedom and they're back again worshiping Baal. And so the question arises there, what means the statement when the Hebrews were obedient or when the Hebrews were disobedient? Obedient to what? Disobedient to what? Therein lies the secret. when they were in obedience to spiritual or cosmic law, when they were loving their neighbor as themselves, when they were acknowledging the one God, the one power, that was when the law operated in them, through them, for them. But as they would become disobedient and mingle with the outside world and again bow down to Baal, then they would lose this idea of the one God, and they would stop loving their neighbor. They would start abusing their neighbor. And then in that disobedience comes their losses and their defeats. Now, you can take this from an individual standpoint and expand it to national and international and see exactly how this works. The Master refers to it in this way: as ye sow, so shall ye reap. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you, thereby good will come to you. There is a state of consciousness that begins right here where we're sitting, which will ultimately govern our outer contact, our outer relationships. Now, if this consciousness has attained a measure of spirituality, by which we mean has acknowledged that all power is in the universal good, that which we call God, cause rather than effect. If we're continuously abiding in that realization, I shall not fear what man can do to me. Man meaning effect. Any effect. Germs, infection, contagion, weather, climate, depressions, wars. I shall not fear the hates, envies, jealousies of men. I shall not fear what man can do to me, because my entire faith is in God, the cause, the center of my being. I cannot acknowledge that you out here have any power over me, or over my supply, or over my health. Why? Because I, in my relationship to God, receive all my good directly from God. You may today be an instrument through which it happens, but if you weren't, there would still be an instrument. And if there weren't an instrument, it would fall right out of the sky. In other words, then, my good is not dependent upon anyone out here, or any group, or any millions of groups. My good is dependent only on my conscious realization of my oneness with God. And so it is. My good is not dependent on the goodwill of people, nor can it be prevented by the ill will of people. Since the goodwill nor the ill will has anything to do with me, it has to do with their own state of consciousness. I and my Father are one. All that the Father hath is mine, and I permit it to flow because there is no percentage in storing it up. No matter how much of truth I have today, it won't do me any good tomorrow. Tomorrow, fresh truth must come. There must be new manna tomorrow. Not new principles, because there are just so many of those, but new ideas about them, new ways of expressing them, new ways of understanding them. In other words, manna is fresh every day, so there's no need to store any up. And so it is with everything in the visible realm. There is no use of storing up where moth and rust doth corrupt, when there's a new supply continuously unfolding from within. Now, if I have that state of consciousness of this infinity of good flowing in me, to me, through me, from me, it becomes a matter of absolute stupidity to steal anything from you, or lie, or cheat, or defraud. For what purpose, if I have within me more than I could ever possibly hope to get outside of me? And so, you cannot reform me outside by threatening to send me to jail or to punish me, because my desires are greater than your threats. But if I can be transformed within, to be shown that I already possess the kingdom of God, and I can be brought to the realization that the kingdom of God is within me, then I am reformed in the sense that I have none of these external desires. Now, once that state of consciousness comes to me, war is prevented in my consciousness. Why should I go to war for something that I already have an infinity of? The same thing, you'll be surprised how ridiculous it becomes to sue anybody, when ultimately you come to the realization that regardless of what you would win, you had more than that anyhow. And without the trouble, and without the vilification, and without the expense. And so you get to a point where you don't rely on human weapons, even the weapons of the law. It's only one step from giving up the sword and the revolver to giving up even the use of legal weapons, and coming into a complete reliance. Now you see, that giving up the sword then, and giving up the use of legal weapons, isn't something you can legislate outside or govern or control outside. You can't do away with people using courts or using swords or guns by talking to them out here, but by showing them or revealing the state of consciousness that has no need of that for which they would be warring or suing. And so you see that when you get into Scripture, you find that when the state of consciousness was of a spiritual nature, that is, when they weren't out looking for what their neighbor had, they prospered. They had the law operating, the law fulfillment operating on their side. But the moment their mind reached out to attain, that was when they no longer had spiritual or cosmic law, or the law of God on their side. Then came the failure. Now you see, we have in Hebrew Scripture Baal as the false gods. But in the Ten Commandments, we have a cosmic law that governs that. Thou shalt not worship idols, images. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. In other words, thou shalt not bow down to any form and worship it, whether it's the form of a human being, or whether it's the form of a crucifix, or the form of a six-pointed star, or whether it's the form of dollar bills, or whether it's the form of medicines. You cannot bow down and worship them as if they had power. Now, when we understand that that commandment and all those references to Baal do not necessarily mean that you shouldn't make an image here and worship it, it doesn't mean that. It does mean that, it includes that, but it goes far beyond that. It means thou shalt not love, hate, fear anything that has form. That's making an idol of it. That's worshiping it. That's praying to it, or that is fearing it. And we have no right to worship. That means to put faith or trust or confidence in anyone or anything that has form, nor should we fear anything that has form, because there is no power in form. There is only power in consciousness, God. All power is in the invisible. Therefore, never fear anything that you can see, hear, taste, touch, or smell, because that is form, image, idol. You see that? So all we can deal with are states of consciousness, not effects. You cannot make covenants to change effects if the state of consciousness behind the covenant hasn't changed. So it is with us. We have every kind of law under the sun and vows, and the only ones who obey them are those who have the consciousness to begin with. Those who haven't, just because they've taken an oath or made a vow, isn't going to move them one single bit to change their nature. A vow, a promise, an oath is nothing, unless it's backed up by the state of consciousness that believes in it. And so it is that we have so many broken promises, so many broken laws, so many broken vows, because the person who takes them hasn't the consciousness of them. Therefore can't be in obedience to it. Now, in our humanhood, we have a materialistic state of consciousness because we are born into an atmosphere which convinces us that we must get, we must achieve, we must accomplish, we must do. And we build for ourselves that getting or materialistic state of consciousness. Now, as we are led into truth studies, spiritual wisdoms, our consciousness begins to be transformed until we come to that place where our mind is not on the external, but is on the consciousness behind the external, to where now we are not concerned with the achieving of something out in this world, but we are concerned with achieving a state of consciousness which will appear harmoniously out in this world. And so our work begins to take place on the inner plane of consciousness rather than on the outer. Now, we cannot eliminate evil from the world. It has never been done. It never will be done. There is no way to remove evil from the world as long as there is an evil consciousness to produce more evil. The only hope individually, for you, for me, which ultimately means the only hope for our city or state or community or world or international world, our only hope is in a transformation of consciousness to where we begin to understand that our good flows from within us, that our protection flows from within us, and we learn not to fear an enemy. They have the arm of flesh only, Hezekiah says. They have only the arm of flesh. Tremendous wisdom in that statement. They have only the arm of flesh. What have we got? We've got God. Now, what avail is the arm of flesh against God? No. But if you take up the sword, then you are placing yourself on the same level as your opponent. Then the stronger may win. Had little David consented to go out on that field with a coat of armor on, he would have been on exactly the same mental level as his opponent, Goliath. And then that great big Goliath would just have swallowed up little David. But David's protection was in the fact that he refused to put on the armor, which was the armor of the world, the armor against the weapons of the flesh, the outer forms. He didn't have to protect himself from that when he knew that that had no power. Why protect yourself from that which has no power? And so, David, in his inner awareness, that all power is in God, does not fear Goliath's club weapon, whatever he had, sword. And so he would not put on the type of armor that would have saved him, or might have saved him from that sword. But he put on the armor of righteousness. And the armor of rightness is the understanding of God as the only power, and not bowing down or worshiping Goliath's weapon, or fearing it, as if it had a power against God. Now, it is the same way. We put on an armor of oneness. The moment we know that I and the Father are one, that all the Father hath is mine, that is the armor. Because now I am protected from any temptation to steal, lie, cheat, defraud, by the realization that I and the Father are one, then all the Father hath is mine. That's my protection from any form of outer temptation. And so it is. We must come to the place where we have that same spirit of oneness to protect us from the world's weapons. Now, the world can pick up the sword, the gun, the bomb. The world can pick up lawsuits. But can that succeed in our experience? No. Don't forget this, though. Don't look around and expect this truth to save the world. Oh, no, 1,000 will fall at your left and 10,000 at your right. This world must collapse. Just as your world and mind is collapsing through these classes, our whole outer world is collapsing. Everything that we thought we could have confidence in, like a God, we're now finding can't do anything for us and won't, isn't giving us and isn't withholding from us. Our whole sense of God is collapsing. Many times people say to me, "You've taken my Lord away." Isn't a bad idea, because it wasn't a Lord. You can't take a person's Lord away. You can take their false concept of a Lord away and restore to them the true idea of God. So it is. In this work, you lose many of the things in which you had confidence. You lose much of your dependence on man whose breath is in his nostril. You lose much of your faith in princes. You get quite a disillusionment in that way. But then your attention is brought back to an invisible on which you can lean, even though you can't see it with the eyes. You can discern it inwardly, feel it inwardly, as David must have. When he threw off that armor that they wanted to put on him, he said, no, no, no. Just went out with this little pebble. Now, as we look into the Bible and see that the worship of a golden calf or a golden dollar is very displeasing to this cosmic law, so we learn in this day that every time we overly love or that we hate, fear, worship something or somebody in the external, in that moment do we begin to have our attention centered on the center of our own being, that place where God shines through. And then we learn that our power of supply, our power of health, our power of immortality, all lies within our own being. Now, through this we perceive the meaning of the Master's teaching that we are only forgiven our sins in proportion as we forgive those who sin or trespass against us. Now we begin to see that there's a law involved. There's a universal law, and no one can beat it. No one can overcome it. No one can get out of its grip. With what measure ye meet, it shall be measured unto you. And if you think that the Master wasn't preaching cosmic law, then go back to him again and see it in many statements. With what measure ye meet, it will be measured to you. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, because there's a law involved. Inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these, ye have done it unto the law. Inasmuch as ye have not done it unto the least of these, ye have not done it unto the law. And you are violating the law and haven't the law on your side. Forgive us our trespasses as, in proportion as we forgive. In other words, there's no power outside of you. The whole power is within you. You can either release this world and forgive it and stop condemning it, or you yourself can be held in your own bondage to your concept of the rest of the world. And if you are holding somebody out here in bondage to their sins or their fears or their diseases, instead of releasing them and saying, nothing holds you in bondage, God is your freedom. Not outwardly or openly, they may not understand it, but inwardly, secretly. Do all of your praying in secret, not outwardly. Don't let men know that you're praying for them. Don't let them see it. Never tell anyone that you're praying for them unless they've asked for it. Never tell anyone that you want to give them a treatment unless they've asked for it. Pray, give the treatment, but do it as a free will gift, not to be seen of men and not to receive praise and not to receive thanks. We don't want any appreciation if we go by and see someone crippled on the street and we have the power to say, neither do I condemn thee, rise. Say it secretly, because we don't want any thanks for it or recognition, because it isn't our doing. It is a revelation or realization that we are receiving. Never, never withhold prayer or treatment. Give it freely, and don't wait to be asked. Only do it silently and secretly unless it is asked. Only when it's asked may you say to the one, yes, I'll be glad to help you. But to all the rest of the world, you do your praying in secret. You do your knowing your truth in secret. You want no reward for it, no recognition. But I'll tell you a strange thing, too, that in cosmic law, it's an impossibility to do a thing in secret without receiving the reward openly. It's a strange law that I discovered through the treatment of animals. It began when I was first reader in the prison in New York. We had a second reader who was a very well-known publisher in New York, and she was an unmarried lady who had a Persian cat. And this Persian cat lived with her, well, at the time, was 13 years. And evidently the only man that came into that apartment was her associate in the publishing business on an evening or so when they might have some business to do or transact. And the cat did not like that man. Whether it was just that man or whether it was male in general, I don't know. But when I had to come into the house on Friday night to go over the reading for Sunday, the cat liked me just as little. And it would go off in the corner and, make the ugliest noises and look at you in the meanest way. And it did the same thing with this other man. And our friend told me that, no, this is a cat that just doesn't like males. That's all it's to it. And that went on as long as we were reading together. I never did make friends with that cat. But after I'd moved to Boston, the day came when this cat was past 14 years of age and evidently had arrived at its time for departure from the plane. And one day I received a telegram that for several days the cat has just remained in a corner, refused to eat, and looks weak as if it were going, please help. And I did give that cat help. And the cat recovered quickly. Within an hour, it went looking for food. But the next time I went to New York and visited Helen, as soon as I was in the seat, the cat jumped up in my lap and started to rub me here. And from then on, I could never be in that house without that cat jumping up here and never leaving me. Well, that was the beginning. I caught something in that, and I watched it. And then I found this. It has never failed. in every case of animal or bird, the moment I'm called upon for treatment for them. From that moment on, they know me, come to me, and will not leave my side. We have several birds and several cats and dogs around the island that the moment I come near, they come over here, and you can't take them away from me. Now, I'm not a cat lover or a dog lover. I'm born and brought up in New York City where we had no such thing. And to me, they're a matter of utter indifference. I've never had one as a pal as other people have. And yet, you would think that I was just one of those natural animal lovers. But no. It is only after I have given them the treatment, prayed, or taken them into my consciousness, that happens. And so I have found, as Alan Boone has found in his writing, that there is only one consciousness, whether it is on the human level or animal level or other. We are all one consciousness. And the moment we learn to make contact with each other, that is the moment love comes into our experience. And this brings up one of the important points. I presume that most of you have already experienced it with your teachers on this path, that a very wonderful bond springs up between you. Male or female, female and female, male and male, male and female, makes no difference. There's a very beautiful bond that springs up between students and teachers, or between practitioners and patients. It's a beautiful thing. Once in a while, through misunderstanding it, the relationship goes haywire, and then you get involved in these love affairs in metaphysical movements. There's no need for it, but there's an excuse for it. Behind it is a wonderful love that always develops between patient and practitioner, teacher and student, where there is a spiritual bond. I'm not speaking now of mental hocus pocus. I'm speaking now where there's a spiritual bond, a wonderful, warm relationship develops. Mutual trust, confidence, hope, sharing. It's the most marvelous thing. And every once in a while, if a person isn't rightly balanced, it will go off the deep end and involve itself into a love affair or a sexual experience, which it has no right to, because basically the relationship is pure, and there isn't even the temptation to take advantage of one another, either sexually, sensually, or financially. There is just the most perfect relationship. It's like the relationship of Eden. But because there is so much love involved in it, anyone who is not and does not maintain their balance may have it go off into too personal an angle. And that is where tragedies come later in fallen idols. Sometimes the student gets to worshiping the teacher and expects the teacher to be some kind of a paragon on earth, some saint on earth. Well, inwardly, I presume that every practitioner on the spiritual path or teacher is a saint inwardly, but they haven't quite achieved the fullness of it outwardly. And so it is well to be a little bit patient with our practitioners and teachers and not quite expect them to have all of the Christ virtues completely manifested. But some students do that and place their teachers on a pedestal and then ultimately find a little bit of clay in there and lose their entire faith. Now, that shouldn't be. Our faith isn't in each other as humans. It is in that spiritual bond that we've discovered. Now, there too, watch. The moment you have achieved one grain of this realization that your good unfolds from within, you now no longer defend yourself from without, nor do you use weapons of offense on the without. And that is when you come into this spiritual bondage with those who are like-minded. Now, you would watch this. If we really are attaining some measure of the consciousness that we are voicing here in this room, then it would be utterly impossible for any one individual in this room to injure or harm or cheat or defraud another one in this room, because there is too much of the level of that spiritual consciousness. Now, there may be some who hear it with their ears but haven't attained that, and they still would be able to take advantage of ambition or whatever form of human cunning it might be. That, too, is why people are often surprised that in spiritual circles that every once in a while you come across a Judas or a doubting Thomas or a denying Peter. That is because they have not yet attained the consciousness of what they're preaching. They know all the words, they know what is to be attained, and they may in some measure have attained it, but they haven't yet come into the fullness of it. Otherwise, they could never want to save their own life at somebody else's expense, nor could they in any way act to deprive another of liberty or freedom or joy or peace or supply, nor could they ever doubt the Christ once they have witnessed it with their inner vision. You see, it's one thing outwardly and with the mind to say, oh, this is a marvelous teacher, and this one teacher has a wonderful vision. That's one thing. It's quite a different thing to see through to the heart of that teacher and say, oh, there's Christ. But if you've ever seen through to the heart of your teacher, a teacher, any teacher, and if you have perceived Christ there, never again could you be either the Judas or the Thomas or the Peter. Now, so it is with us individually as we learn to behold each other as practitioners and teachers do. They come to where the earnest, honest, spiritually minded ones, they come to a place where they perceive your true nature. You may still be pretty mean outwardly. You may still be too human outwardly. But from the moment that they perceive your true nature, they utterly disregard your outer failings, pay no attention to them, and just live in that consciousness of your inner being until you are completely awakened and living into it yourselves. Well, so it is in your relationship with others. As you perceive the spiritual nature of man, you not only have no power left to offend him, but neither have you the power left to criticize, judge, or condemn him while he's still in his states of humanhood. You now perceive that he couldn't act in any other way from his present standpoint of understanding. So it is that you will note that as this consciousness of love develops, let's remember this, will you? Love is the fulfilling of the law. We're speaking now about cosmic law and its fulfillment. Well, love is the fulfilling of it. Cosmic law is, but love is the fulfilling of cosmic law. Now, before we came into this room, there was nothing here. There was nothing here for good or for evil. It was just a room. Then we came in and brought with it the atmosphere of our consciousness. Now, because we brought with us the atmosphere of love, of truth, that's all we're here for, this room is permeated with love and truth, and it would be difficult to find a battle or a fight or a war in this room because the room is permeated with love. But if we had brought into it an atmosphere of distrust, of hate, envy, jealousy, then we could have wars even in this room, and battles and hair-pulling matches. Do you see that? It is all a matter of our state of consciousness. Now, love is the fulfilling of the law, so that the law of peace in this room is entirely due to love having filled our consciousness when we came in. Love of truth, desire for truth, seeking of truth. All of that is love. And because we came into this room with love, we find here the atmosphere and law of love at work. There undoubtedly is healings taking place in this room. There must be. But if they are only taking place not because of the room, but because of the love that is in this room. The love which is a fulfilling of the law of health and harmony. Now, if there are discords in our bodies, sense of discord, of a sinful nature, sickful nature, there is no way to eradicate it from the outside. The only way to eradicate it is through love, which is the fulfilling of the law. How are we to love? Well, number one way is by not bearing false witness against our neighbor, by knowing the truth about the world. The moment you begin to know the truth about spiritual man and discern the spiritual nature of man, regardless of his present attitudes, you are fulfilling the law through love. The minute you live in an atmosphere of no condemnation, no criticism, no judgment, you are fulfilling the law through love. The very moment that you spend some time each day in conscious forgiveness, you are fulfilling the law through love. In other words, you must loose him and let him go, whatever it is that's in bondage within you. You must loose this thing within yourself through love. Now, the highest love is the love which just sits back and contemplates God as the law unto this universe. Just to sit back in your home for 5 or 10 minutes and realize that behind the events of the world is an infinite power of love that can take over, govern, guard, guide, direct, lead, inspire, illumine. Just sitting back and realizing that form and figure, personalities, is not power. The invisible alone is power. Just to sit back 5 minutes in your home and ponder this. Just think. Out in the world, everybody is in fear of effects, weather, climate, germs, other people, weapons. Yet the truth is that no weapon that is formed can do anything to you. No weapon that is formed, nothing in the way of form, can be destructive to me or to the universe of those who understand this, since the invisible alone is power. Well, 5 minutes of that type of love is the fulfilling of the law. But then we're told in 25th Matthew that we must even come down to earth and do some human service. And so it may be that somewhere on earth we are holding in bondage someone, some group, some race, nation, creed, church, philosophy. We may be holding something or someone in condemnation, in unforgiveness. And there comes the need specifically to forgive. Now, as we have brought out here, it isn't an easy thing to forgive a person or a nation that is harming us. To look at them and say, oh, I forgive you. That's not so easy. May even be impossible. But this we can do. We can turn from their human evil and then turn from their human good and say, oh, wait, I wouldn't be too interested even if you were humanly good. I'm not interested in human evil or human good. I'm thinking of the Christ at the center of your being, and in it there is no need of forgiveness because it is already the Son of God. And so I neither praise your good nor condemn your evil because they're part of the Adam dream, but I do apprehend your Christhood. I just think of being able to say that to the person on earth who has most despitefully used you, or persecuted you, or hated you, or been jealous or envious or malicious to you, and think what it would mean to them if somebody on earth were releasing them from their own states of humanhood. Now, you would be doing that secretly. You wouldn't be telling them. you would be holding it as a secret and sacred obligation to look and say, why, just think, I've been thinking of you as a bad human when all the time you wouldn't be important to me as a good human, because all I want of you is your spiritual identity. My mother and I had a very, very wonderful relationship for many years. I was the eldest son, and my father spent most of his time traveling, and so that threw my mother and I together a good bit. And when I was just over 13, she had a little tuxedo suit made for me, and every Friday and Saturday night I would take her out to dinner and theater. And so my mother and I had a lot of time in each other's company and knew each other well. Then the day came when I had to travel, and I began with writing her a letter every single day, 7 days a week. And throughout our entire experience together, I doubt that there was ever a day that a letter wasn't written. They weren't always mailed in one day, but there were many times when she got 5 letters at one time. And there came that moment when she left our visible sight. And for me, it was a minute of complete torture. I knew what it was to lose my God, because there wasn't any God any closer to me than my mother. And for a few minutes, it really was a torture. But I had a friend who was a Christian Science practitioner, and the one who brought me through that experience when I'd been given only 3 months to live. And so I was able to telephone to her. And I haven't the faintest idea of what she said to me, but I have never forgotten the effect. I was lifted instantly, even before I was away from the telephone, out of my grief and out of all sense of separation. And from that time on, there has never been any sense of being separate from my mother. It's just as if we still were together as we always were. And one of our family once said to me, I don't know how you ever survived that shock of that separation. It must have been something terrible. And I said, no, it was for a minute. But after this realization came, I learned from it this lesson. My mother's body never meant anything to me. I never thought of her as a body. I never looked at her body. I was never concerned with her body. And I was just as happy with my mother when I was in Europe and she was in America, or when I was one part of the country and she in another. Her body or physical proximity had never meant anything to me. Then I understood the meaning of no separation, because that of my mother, which was my pal, I still have. That of my mother, which represented the love interest, I still have. That has never left. The only thing is her body. And I was separated from her body loads of time and never was too interested when I was close to it. So we come to see that in our relationship with each other, there is a spiritual bond. And we are never separated from each other, nor are we separated from our good. Now let us never forget this. There is a bond between everyone who has discerned the Christ of each other. And after that, their physical sense is of no importance to us. We can enjoy it while we're with it, like we can enjoy an automobile or a theater or an ice cream soda. But we don't have to grieve when we're apart from them. Well, I think that must hold us for this morning.